Okay.
Okay, it has started.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is October the 28th, 2018, and this is our Genie Seminar. Genie Seminar being a new exciting means of sharing our genies to solve important issues, important puzzles. Einstein identified one of the most important puzzle. It has to do with our happiness, love, and our creativity and our survival. And the puzzle is, why is it that we fill our world with fear, scarcity, hate, and war, when what we want and need is happiness, enough, love, and peace? And he told us that we can achieve that. We can prevent the predictable problem we have with the spreading of weapons of mass destruction if we teach ourselves a newer way of thinking that leads to cooperation instead of competing, instead of competition. Now we've over the past we've discussed the 7 simple word changes, the mind-freeing, life-changing, world-saving simple word changes that change the way we think to a higher level of processing information from either or to both and. And we've discussed the 2 most powerful love creation skills. And we've gone on now to the 8 choices available to all of us, each of us. We have 8 possible choices for any issue that we face. So we started with the first 3 of the 8, and the last meeting we discussed the third, which was one of the basic ones, avoidance. We said the most powerful or the most automatic of the responses is the fight or flight response, which is built into all of us. And the fight response is the blaming out response, or in our human society, we've taken that blaming out response, redirected the anger to ourselves, to what we call guilt. So we have blaming out and blaming in, which is part of the fight response. And then last week we discussed the avoidance response. And the avoidance response it was, when we discussed it last week, everyone felt that we didn't have enough time to really thoroughly discuss these issues and asked that we repeat it. Usually we take one at a time, but if you recall last week, we had a hot discussion going. People said, let's do this one again to continue. So here we are. We're going to hear the recording, and then we're going to share your opportunity to share your personal experience. So let's hit the share now. And we're sharing the sound.
Talk closer to your mic. You're in and out.
And let's see. I'm looking for the file now. Let's see. It's down here. Welcome to Module 3 of the Education.
You're not sharing the screen, Dad.
Sharing the screen.
Wonderful. Okay.
Share computer sound. Click on share computer sound first.
Okay. I've got to get back to this. I guess I've got to close that. Okay, I just hit the share screen now.
Yeah, share computer sound on the left side, and then you have to click share again on the right side, bottom of the window.
Okay, that's there. Now we go back to share again.
Yep. Did you click on the share computer sound?
I think we're here. Let's see if that does it. No? So
Let us do one thing. Let us do the team viewer thing again. I don't know why this is not working. Just 1 second. You always forget to click this share, the second share, Don. You have to click always click the second one, okay?
Are you going to do it or you want me to do it?
Yeah, I'm doing it. Okay. Now, I think you closed that one. Okay, 1 second. I'm opening this.
Why don't we start this recording over, share it, because it's going to be difficult to edit it.
No, that's fine. You can edit it. That's not a big deal. Actually, I remember I had pasted it here. Okay, I remember I had already saved it, so we are good.
Welcome to Module 3 of the Education Community Curriculum to make our life wonderful. The avoidance response is strand 3 of the 8 choices on the Mental Freedom Control Panel. It commonly leads us to what we don't want. Avoidance is one of the most prevalent negative actions because it is a mental expression of the flight part of the instinctive fight or flight instinct. Avoidance has many forms of expression, such as procrastination, lying, denial, substance abuse, and refusing to face difficult issues that really require mental problem solving.
Today's strand considers the third of the 8 choices available to our willpower to transform information into action. I've labeled it the avoidance response because it has its origin in the primitive flight part of our fight or flight instinct. The avoidance mental action pathway is so powerful because it has been hardwired into our biology throughout our history. This primitive, automatic, innate flight pathway is our emergency action to run or hide from life-threatening danger. In animals, it is a favored means of survival. For example, it has been shown that some species instinctively distinguish the distant shape of a predator bird from that of a safe silhouette, automatically releasing red alert chemicals that signal the need to run. In our relatively civilized society, physically running away is seldom effective. First, modern technology makes it easy to find people. Second, physical life-threatening stress is uncommon. Most people constantly face symbolic danger and pink alert chronic psychological stress. Thus, we learn to substitute mental means of avoidance for physical ways to run away. Running away to escape a mugger is actually a problem-solving response rather than avoidance. Our intelligent mind creates ingenious alternative ways to avoid discomfort. Most preserve short-term pleasure at the cost of a longer-term harmful outcome. Present feelings are often innately more powerful than objective reason. Reason lacks the force of emotion unless we teach ourselves the endorsement skills that link emotion to the intelligent action choice. The avoidance mental response pattern is discouraged because the longer-term and sometimes the shorter-term outcome no longer works and often is dangerous. Here are some readily observed avoidance patterns our mind substitutes for physically running. Procrastination, finding another activity to escape an unpleasant task. Socially running, changing jobs, spouses, friends, residences, and so on. Substance abuse, inappropriate use of alcohol, drugs, and food. Telling lies. It was my brother who did it. Withdrawal, isolating oneself physically and or emotionally. Self-deception, The mind is so effective, deception is accepted as truth. For example, denial. I can stop drinking whenever I choose. Rationalization. Excuses believed by the individual but no one else. The traffic makes me late. It's because my biorhythms are off. Paranoia. Projecting our uncomfortable ideas, feelings on another. They don't like me because I have pimples. Substitution displacement. Angry with his boss, he kicks his dog. Regression. We revert to an inappropriate pattern that previously worked. A 4-year-old wets himself when a new sibling gets more attention. Physical and or psychological illness. Feigned or exaggerated physical and or mental illness may excuse one from facing a stressful reality. Becoming Napoleon or some other powerful person is more satisfying than being a nobody. Most common expressions of the avoidance response, such as substance abuse and procrastination, are easily spotted. Patterns involving mental self-deception are among the most difficult to manage because individuals believe their distorted thinking. I would like to consider in greater detail the various means of self-deception our mind uses to replace the hardwired instinct to physically run or hide. However, my priority is to first provide you with the most crucial, a new way of thinking wisdoms that popularize mental wealth and establish a substantial grassroots movement of peace leaders. I hope to revisit the more difficult to recognize self-deception means of avoidance at some point, but in the meantime, there are many books available that address these mechanisms our mind creates to avoid discomfort. Negative action patterns are our major source of unhappiness and danger. The most effective ways to control avoidance behavior and the other 5 negative patterns is to learn and practice the common sense, newer way of thinking. Focusing on the 2 universal positive mental responses, problem solving and self-endorsement, often brings about the desired change without even having to directly challenge the avoidance mental response pattern. The negative responses tend to atrophy or melt away as the problem-solving and self-endorsement action pathways are more regularly practiced. In addition, developing the positive responses often motivate the individual to directly attack their negative patterns. Many additional methods such as love, education, counseling, religious healing, relaxation training, yoga, meditation, medications, and a supportive environment are effective. Individuals who rely on the mental self-deception avoidance behaviors often lack motivation and resist giving up their defense against discomfort. They are more difficult to persuade to engage in the self-education that inspires better alternatives. In addition to the various interventions here indicated, social pressure and strict limit setting may be required to control antisocial and harmful behavior. I have learned not to give up on resistive individuals because of my prior work with lifestyle drug addicts and antisocial individuals. There are many ways to encourage, sometimes bribe, even the most resistive individuals to come around. Please don't miss the next trend, the universally powerful common sense problem-solving mental action pathway. Here's wishing you tons of mental wealth.
Okay, we are back into our meeting. And
Okay, so now we are here.
okay.
Okay, so the first thing that happens is we are recording this now for Basu because Basu was not in the meeting today. So we can actually use Zoom recording to give the requirement to Basu. Okay, now what we are doing now is first thing what will happen is you will go to internet or you will go to these radio shows and other avenues, and you will try to sell college level course through through peace.academy. Is this understanding correct? So when you say peace.academy, then presumably the audience, some of the audience members will either through their own or through other people suggesting them come to peace.academy. When they come to peace.academy, they will come and see this. Here, instead of this video, you will give a different video which will be recorded by Brad, a very simple video which will request the audience to go and get a college level course, right? The link to the college level course, because in the video when you are talking, you cannot put a link there, right? So the link, which is the 7+2 formula recording, this one, right? The recordings. The lovingmenow.org.
Sharat.
Sharat.
So
Yeah.
this link needs
Sharat.
to be somewhere near to the video.
Share it.
Yes.
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 I don't quite. Share it. We were
You are
going.
simply telling them that you welcome to the college level course, and you look. You see.
Sharat's on autopilot.
Okay. The person goes.
Right.
I say,
Share
thank you
it.
very much for telling me this. They get out of this website. They go to this website. So there is a very serious person. He goes and listens to all these videos.
Share it.
Then what happens?
Share it. Those are all very wonderful ideas, plans, but we're waiting for the response to this recording. Can you hear me okay, Sharat?
And then he can, if he's interested in doing more, he can sign up to
Share it. I think you're.
pursue.
Dad, are you broadcasting something from your side? Are you playing back something?
I think Sharat is.
Can't say guide.
I think Sharat is playing a recording instead. I'm not quite sure what's going on
First
here.
guide is
Sharat.
Yeah, Dad, the recording might be coming from you. It might be a recording that you had with Sharat.
I came to this website. Push.
Okay, so
I came to this website, and
So do you have, is there a playback on your computer, Dad, that you can stop?
on the link below.
You have a playback
On
somewhere?
the link below, and I came to this website. Right?
I
Here
wish
I
I
heard
knew
everything.
what I had to do
You are
here.
here. You are explaining me, but how will that person know? That person doesn't know what to do.
what you're doing is very good.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing. So they come here. They
You're done? What happened?
Sharat, I don't know how we've got this recording on now.
There's a playback occurring from, I think, my dad's computer, and he doesn't know how to stop it. So we're getting the playback coming through.
all of your free course materials.
So, Sharat, do you have the ability to log on to his computer from TeamView and shut off the playback?
They go to my talk, and the first step will be to listen to the 7+2 formula.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an arrow there that immediately, there's the arrow. You just had it up on the screen where you had a ticket, the lottery ticket, and the arrow. Both of those are really taking them to Brad Shep's recordings.
Okay, let's see if I.
Both of these are taking them to Brad Shepard recording.
No.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had
Sharat, do you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Can you shut off the recording that's going on?
Yeah, I'm shutting off everything. 1 second. I think it is gone now. Okay. No, we are back on track. Sorry.
Shut off everything. Shut off your lights, your water. Shut off everything.
Okay, we are back.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we return you to Dr. Don Pett, already in progress.
Thank you. That's a wonderful announcement. I can tell that's from an experienced radio person.
It's why I'm here. Now it's quiet. Now it's like E.F. Hutton spoke. No one's saying anything.
Who can follow the golden voice?
That's very kind of you, Robbie.
I think, Don, you keep on clicking on things which you don't need to. Don't wait, just hold on. Don't click on things because again you are clicking on something else. Don't click on anything. Okay?
Okay. You have
Don, touch nothing, Don. Touch nothing ever again. Nothing terrible is happening.
I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. I hope that won't disturb anybody.
Me too. Cheers. There you go.
Good. We are good to go.
Kathy, why don't you climb a tree or something until blows over?
Well, actually, now's your opportunity. You had a chance to think about all the ways you avoid dealing with reality.
We're just laughing and having a hoot, and Sister says this is the ultimate avoidance, you know. The spiritual avoidance.
And of course, humor is one of the best ways to deal with reality, not to
It
avoid
is.
reality.
It always is, and it always will be.
Yes.
The funny thing is, Don did everything that he could have avoided in a Zoom meeting.
So now let's get. Did you get a chance to hear the recording or no?
Yes. I
Yes,
think
yes.
the recording came through.
So we're ready for the discussion then. So now, Sharon, I guess we can edit some of this out. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think this is fine the way it is. But if we want, we can edit it. That's not a problem.
Okay, so let's just start then. So let's get back then, and I'll get to my regular voice here. So we've discussed, we've all heard Brad share the recording of the avoidance response. And now the more you can relate this to your own life experience, the greater it will be a learning experience, unless you feel that you don't use any of these avoidance responses and you're already perfect. So in that case, let's share any of your own personal thoughts or ideas. Last week you were pretty hot on a number of issues, so wanted to continue, so maybe you can recall some of the things you were addressing. And most of you are muted now, so remember you have to unmute yourself if you're going to speak.
I avoid things by running to the refrigerator.
We'll take the talking feather in North Carolina. My sister here wants to share her very real experience with this topic, and I'll pass it to you.
What is your name, sister?
It's Denise. Nice to be here.
Welcome, Denise.
As I'm sure all you're aware that my area was hit by Hurricane Florence, and then Hurricane Michael, well, it was tropical storm by the time it came here, but this whole East Coast and all, we have been in the mega avoidance of fight or flight for almost a month. And I mean, people have not even been driving right, they haven't been acting right, they've been, totally just taking it out on each other, arguing, and because it was like a while before they could even get food in here. We lost a lot of roads, houses. Now everybody's fighting with the system of insurance companies, and the insurance companies are avoiding paying their people's for help, and FEMA's not helping, and it's just everybody's just like in mega avoidance of fight or flight and ready to kick some ass. I mean, and it's very stressful. So I've actually been, we've all been in cleanup mode and just trying to get our lives back to some normalcy as our whole eastern coast has been devastated by destruction. So I think we would probably be turning to substance abuse, anything to get through what we've been through. And the fear factor was off the charts for this event for us. So that's where, and it was so great. I haven't seen Kathy in like 3 years, and we were talking about this last night. Now we get to hear this. So it's like all divine synchronicity. Thank you. And thank you very much.
It sounds like with the work that you do, you're really right in the middle of it. You can't avoid it. You have to clean up the roads, and you have to try to get some power back, or refrigeration, or whatever. So I think there's sometimes you would like to avoid it, but you really can't. You've got to be right in there. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, there was definitely no avoiding any of this. It was either we had to just, everybody had to pull together and get through it, because we do have a lot of road destruction still, a lot of debris, a lot of, they say, 3 to 4 months for us, but of course our brothers and sisters in Florida are in a whole different arena. But yeah, so I think it's been life altering for a lot of people, and healing as well. To find out, material things is not everything. and that's another avoidance. Just go buy some more stuff, and that's not what it's about.
That sounds like that's not so much avoidance, but you're kind of adapting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely.
I think
Sounds more like coping.
Yeah.
it's a good example, though, of we've said that these different response patterns, your mental response control panel patterns, the 8 patterns or the 7 word switches, that they're all pieces of the puzzle that fit together. So we've said that blaming out and blaming in and avoidance are the most basic because they're biologic. We inherit them. So they're most fundamental responses. So these are good examples of how when there's scarcity, when there isn't enough, then people first they start blaming others and then they find ways of avoidance. So you get fighting. So one leads to the other. First, it leads to blaming others, and then we may blame ourselves for not being prepared, and then we finally find coping. But it's interesting to see how these pieces of the puzzle fit together. We talk about them one at a time, but as we go through these, try to realize how each of these is it's like a musical score. One note leads to the next, one way of dealing leads to the next, and we begin to put this together, and we begin to understand our behavior. When we understand our behavior, then we can really start making changes and find a more productive pattern.
I'm not sure the problems of scarcity or, I'm not quite sure how I see the avoidance piece of this, of Denise's situation. I mean, I see a mess. I see a lot of trouble and challenge. But it sounds like people are going after the insurance company. They're not avoiding going after the insurance company. I guess you could say, do you pull out a shovel and start filling in the roads yourself, or do you start complaining to government, or start putting pressure on FEMA so they start doing things? So I'm not. You just in the model here. It's a mess, and I'm not sure. Sort of because it's not avoidance isn't a that's not a doesn't lessen the problem any. But I'm just thinking in my mind that the avoidance doesn't seem to be what's happening. It's more of there's scarcity and people are trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And then they're actually going ahead and doing it. There's not a lot of good alternatives to do. But I'm trying to think as avoidance would be more along the lines of, well, I'm just not gonna call the FEMA people because I know I'm gonna be wasting my time.
Indeed, Obi, it's probably not a great
I
example.
I have ran into people that have said that they're like, I'm not even gonna bother. Why bother? They're not gonna help me. I'm like, you haven't even tried. I tried. I got turned down, but I tried. But it's like. They're like, oh, I'm not even going to mess with that. We're not qualified, or I keep hearing this over and over and over. So,
I guess in summary, I was kind of summarizing what we were all about here to Denise, and in telling her that Don is looking at our fight or flight reactions different. That was a lot of maybe what stimulated her to think about the storm, and she said, oh, we just went through all that, and I could talk about avoidance, so. Perhaps not the best example, and back to where I was last week. I said it's kind of my avoidance, if you will, that has me on this journey, because we've discussed how Don says each person feels individually so helpless in what they do towards world peace. And I said my little journey is kind of an effort for me to put energies towards things that are going to have more world peace. And I actually was on the last 2 days. We've had the first day, this gentleman who, David Williams, he's been a long time planter of peace trees. And anyway, I'm just finding it hard to find the words to summarize the situation. This a new group of people called the Longhouse Coalition that is talking about more peace has kind of developed in the last few days, and how it all fits together. And of course, I'm always telling them about Don's beautiful family here and his efforts and what he's up to. And I guess so for me, this journey is kind of a a way to reducing the avoidance in my life. And thank you for listening to our little situation here in North Carolina and putting up with me. And I'll return the talking feather.
Oh, hey, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Denise. I'm going to bring up a slightly different aspect of this avoidance that I find what I do, and I've read some stuff about this, it is if I'm sort of obsessing about something or, overly thinking something and spending a lot of time worrying about it, there's this idea that, well, just start thinking about something else and just sort of break the pattern. And, in one sense, I kind of think of that sort of healthy avoidance. That, I'm obsessing about something, I'm overthinking something, I'm worrying about something. One pattern is, well, you can't really tell yourself to stop thinking. That doesn't really work. But if you just start thinking about something else, you kind of just take that energy and just displace what you were obsessing about or worrying about. And I'm just curious, would that be viewed as avoidance, but some constructive form of avoidance?
I don't know, because I tend to do the same thing. And I try very hard to note for myself when I'm not getting traction in thoughts or communication, and I make a commitment to stop right then and there, but to reapproach. Reapproach for me is the key word. And I think if you do make a commitment to reapproach and you follow through on that, you're not really avoiding something.
Reapproach means kind of readdressing the same problem, or?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of communication, if you're really having an issue with another individual and you realize you're not communicating, it's good for me to terminate the encounter and return to it at another point. I don't think that's avoiding it. I think it's going to neutral mental corners and then coming out again and trying to recognize that we were not communicating. Now let's try to communicate. And with other issues, not just with other people, I tend to do the same thing. I'll just stop, I'll go on to something else and return to the problem.
When am I'm trying to, hi, it's Josephine, and sorry I'm on blackout. I'm preparing for a brunch today, so I'm in the background.
I thought you might be with Sharad. He's in blackout too.
I want to apologize for that. When is it avoiding? And when is it really, allowing yourself to go to sleep, to not think about it just for that period of time, putting it away or walking away, from an argument or from a painful thoughts or painful situations. So I'm struggling with when is it avoiding it really, when is it detrimental and when is it a safety mechanism?
Yeah,
I think it's hard.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pacey.
I think it's hard to separate those without knowing somebody's intent, which is very hard to know. I think there's times when not addressing something or avoiding something is part of a bigger strategy that's actually maybe a very wise resolution to a problem. From the outside, it may look to someone else like it's avoidance. So I think it's hard to pass judgment when you look, when you look at one frame of someone's long movie. I think it's easy to pass judgment on what's going on in that frame, but in reality, that's part of a long movie, and without knowing much more of the movie or what that person's intent is, I think we have to be careful about what we label as avoidance, because it may be, part of a bigger strategy. Anne Frank, when she's hiding under the floor in that person's house, is she avoiding something, or is that, part of a better strategy? That she looked at her alternatives and she decided, to hide and write. So I think we have to be careful about passing judgment on what may look like avoidance to us.
Yeah, and maybe I agree with that, Pacey. I also agree with Brad and Josephine in that although you can't tell what somebody's intention is, you know, there is a good strategy to walk away and then re-engage when the situation is sort of, you know, not hopeless, but it's you know you're not getting through. And in order to avoid the inevitable worst situation, you walk away and say, I'll re-engage at another time. You know, me, when that happens, it's usually a brain cramp that causes it, but that's beside the point, you know.
Yeah, I'm not. I in a sense, I guess that's maybe the intent is sort of a key here. But you know, a lot of when you're kind of obsessing about something, you know, the tactic of, well, I'm just going to start thinking about something else, and essentially avoiding it, or doing something to, you know, suppress it, or suppress whatever the obsessive behavior is that you're trying to extinguish. In a sense, that is avoidance. So, you know, I got a big problem. I'm really worrying about it, and I can't get any sleep. You know, in my mind, does that become a constructive response to do that, or that gets categorized as another response? You know, as you sort of flow from one thing to another. You know, I can't stop thinking about it, but I'm going to kind of replace it with doing something else or thinking something else. To me, that sounds like that might be a constructive response rather than something to be avoided.
Let me offer an explanation that I think might be helpful. When you call a timeout in the interest of working at a longer term solution, that's problem solving. It's not avoidance. When you call a timeout and you avoid something and you don't resolve the issue or don't address the issue, that's a negative response. So if you're very anxious and you use a little alcohol, for example, and it calms you down so that you actually perform better, that could be a very positive use of alcohol. But when you use alcohol and it doesn't resolve an issue to an excess, then it becomes a problem-solving response, not a constructive. It becomes an avoidance response, not a problem-solving response. So you have to look at the long-term outcome of what you do. So if you, for example, if you're arguing and you're not getting anywhere, instead of escalating, you call a timeout. That's a lot different than never dealing with the situation again. You say, we're kind of heated right now. Let's talk about this a little later in the future. On the other hand, if you're running to the refrigerator every time because every time you're anxious, and then you begin to realize that really doesn't solve the problem. All you're doing is you're gaining weight. That's an avoidance response. But if it gives you a little time to think about something, it becomes a puzzle-solving response. So you have to ask yourself, what is the long-term outcome of my action? What is the intent of it? And I think you'll see that there isn't, it gets away from this absolute right or wrong kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree, and I think Don, you know, confirming, you know, what Pacey said, what Brad said, what Josephine said, and sort of where Avi was coming from, also is you know, but where does procrastination come into play, right? So I see procrastination more as a negative avoidance, or maybe not, because I know myself. I'm a procrastinator. I wait till the last minute for everything. You know, if I don't, if I'm not attentive to it, I'll just procrastinate, and it becomes avoidance by default rather than avoidance by intention. You know what I mean?
Be good to yourself, John. There's a very fine line between procrastination and prioritizing.
Certainly is. Right. I like that one. I'm going to use that one when I'm procrastinating and my wife tells me that, you know, this got to get done. You know, no. It's just the right prioritization, honey.
It's
Right.
not working hard, it's working smart. That's the difference.
Right. Certainly.
I just thought of a way around this is, you can put something off with the intent to do it later, but then when that later never comes, you've actually sort of done the right thing. It's just that one instant later on that you've decided to let it fall off the priority queue. That's a way to thread the needle to still procrastinate and reward yourself.
Well, I think there's also seriously, I think there's also a danger in kidding yourself if you promise yourself you're going to get back to something and you really just don't want to deal with it, and it falls by the wayside or slips through the cracks. Then there's a lack of productivity that comes into play.
We keep coming back to the notion of, what's the long-term outcome? You use the long-term outcome as a way of kind of judging or measuring whether one particular behavior or response is right. And I think that, I wonder if that's misleading as well. You think about, people who are hungry, we're the fortunate few, many people have tremendous unmet needs. And, many people respond to their unmet needs in the moment because they exist and they live in the moment. And they need to find a way to get the next meal or their next job or their next dollar or their next day of safety. So I don't know if it's a fair yardstick from us who sit on the top of the mountain, reasonably safe and secure, to to preach to or to make a plan that puts other people in the position of prioritizing the long term over the short term. I mean, many people use all of their resources and all of their energy just to deal with the short term. And I think we may be presumptive to say, well, the long term is more important. Long-term peace is more important than the short term. So it's going to lead to some other greater good.
One of our word switches, remember, is substituting both and for either or. So it's not right or wrong. It's what seems to be the most appropriate or effective to get what we want. The really issue is wisdom. Wisdom is doing what gets us the desired outcome. And it's both the short and the long-term issue, not either short or long-term. But our animal brain tends to divide everything in the either or. It's either, we've been thinking so long in terms of two categories. If we can use a long time, a while back when we talked about the word switches, if we substitute both and for either or, you realize we're talking about the short and the long-term outcome.
One of the things which I know is avoidance. Like, one of the outcomes of avoidance is it peps up a lot of things in our mind. When we, suppose I'm upset about something, and I just, in order to not to confront anyone, I keep on keeping it with me. I keep on thinking about it. It somehow, the body reacts to it because it cannot hold so much emotion. There are sleeplessness, there is more quick reactions to things, anger, other ways that the body reacts to it, where it is not normal behavior. So especially this is where a group like this really works very well, where we can co-create and discuss on issues, and associate with our uh, personal experiences and learn together.
Well, what I'm picking up with this particular response avoidance is it seems to have a lot to do with intent, or what you kind of plan to do. A lot of times I think not thinking about something at the time or taking a time out is all really a productive response. Maybe it's got a different label. but it can be slippery. You can kind of put something off indefinitely, something that's hard to do. But I'm concluded that there's a lot of if something's been bothering me, it seems like an effective response is to start thinking about something else and put it aside for a bit.
Mhm.
And it's just if the intent is to never come back or just to suppress it and then go away, it becomes maybe more of the problem, as opposed to stopping something and not confronting something. It seems like there's lots of occasions where you might not want to confront something right away, and it might be the prudent thing to do. So,
Well, it's kind of like making. Hindsight is easy, and it's kind of like making an editorial judgment, in the sense that I think what you're doing that is productive is you're recognizing that suddenly there's no content in what's happening here, that it's extraneous, static, and you're trying to excise that. And you have to stop and then regroup and then reapproach and try to start again and move past that static that you're getting, whether you're dealing with other people or other situations. And I think removing that is productive. You're removing what is counterproductive.
Yeah, that makes sense, Brad. And sometimes though, what starts out to be, I go back to procrastination. What starts out to be procrastination ends up being a good strategy. So you procrastinate, then you go back and you look at that same situation, and then sometimes you realize, you know what, the best thing to have done was nothing. Sometimes your contemplation is the best move to make, and especially when you're obsessing of things, right? Is sometimes getting your mind off it and then coming back to it is a better strategy.
You have to zoom out. You have to zoom out when you're absolutely spinning your wheels. You've got to try to regain the perspective that's got lost. And it's funny because it's ironic, isn't it, to say that doing nothing is suddenly, it's anemic, that doing nothing is suddenly an improvement over doing something that isn't working.
Right. The other thing is it also gives time when, to Don's point before, where you were maybe in something heated and then you back off. It also gives time for forgiveness and love to re-enter the situation and heal the thing, right? That was there before, and gives you time to now re-engage in a different mindset. That then helps, I think, also. So my procrastination is always actually a good thing. Just want everybody to
And rationalization, was that rationalization in somewhere in one of these responses? You're skipping ahead, John?
And running to the refrigerator is not necessarily a bad strategy either. I found that moving the refrigerator into the office is probably a good idea.
If you're thinking about it, you're not really avoiding it, right?
I agree with that.
So
I agree with that. That's actually, you're right there, Josephine.
yeah, so it's because avoidance isn't always just about the action, right? It's all about, the planning of. So even if you're procrastinating, John, if your intent is to go ahead and do it at some point, then you're really not avoiding it. You're just making it take a longer time to get it done. So the back to the notion of avoidance, I'm wondering if avoidance in the sense that I'm avoiding it because I know I don't know, it's the wrong thing to do. It's gonna make me feel bad, some kind of guilt. Back to the notion of the guilt, or So I'm wondering when avoidance is good and when avoidance is bad, right? And how do I know the difference? Because if we just take it back to world peace, we can't stick our heads in the sand and avoid this any longer. And thinking about it is not enough, right? So we need to figure out what becomes the actions that we want to move towards. So anyway, just to finish the thought, which just sounds like I'm rambling. It's because I'm trying to get my mind around it. Is when is it good? When is it bad? When do we need to then take control of it and then say, these are the actions. We need to come up with a plan.
I find that if I avoid something, I start getting very uncomfortable. I mean, I'll rearrange a closet, or I'll read a magazine or something like that. And I get very uncomfortable because I know what it is I really could do to make myself feel better. So I've noticed lately, rather than wait a long time, I try to do it sooner rather than later. I mean, if I'm avoiding writing a letter to somebody and I think of all these other things to do, if I just stop and say, oh, get it over with, and that seems to be helpful. I mean, this is assuming I'm not forgetting what the thing is, and usually I'm not, because it's there as a sort of an irritation. So when avoidance is more uncomfortable than just doing it, then it gets done.
Is where we talk about avoidance? I wonder, is avoidance part of the issue with this, engaging or attending to this world peace issue? And I think the more I think about it, the more I feel like avoidance, although it's a common strategy, I don't know that it's part of. I don't know how to see it as part of people engaging in or not engaging in efforts at bringing about world peace. I think there may be different things like apathy or kind of not knowing, but I don't. I'm not sure I see how people are put off by this notion or made uncomfortable by this notion of approaching it. I wonder if the bigger issue is they just don't really know how even to approach it. I think avoidance is kind of built on, I know what I should do, but I'm going to find a way of not doing it. And I think this world peace issue, it involves something more subtle than avoidance.
Well, it was discussed earlier that the idea of why bother? Nothing is going to happen. Why bother to complain to the FEMA or whatever, because nothing will happen anyway. And one of the 8 mental response control panels we haven't discussed yet is the helpless, hopeless response, which is one of the most dangerous responses. We haven't gotten to this one yet, but it's one of the most dangerous response, because when we enter that helpless, hopeless response, we shut down our energy factory, and then there's no further any hope of making any change because we're no longer trying. So if you go to our website, EC website, you'll see there's interviews with loads of people who say they wish or pray for world peace. But when you ask what they do about it, most say, I don't do anything because I don't think one person can make a difference. One person can't do anything. That's the kind of thing that Kathy and her sister were bringing up earlier. If I feel like I can't do anything, then I don't bother, I forget about it, because, and as most people, when you ask, well, why don't you do anything? Well, they say it's up to God, or it's up to our leaders to take care of it. But I can't do anything as an individual, so I don't even bother about it. So that's one of the most devastating of the 8 choices we have available when we shut down our energy factory. And remember when we talked about the 7 word switches, when you say, I think I can, that's the turn on energy word switch. So you begin to see how these responses can fit together, but you have to get the different pieces of the puzzle. And I just mentioned to remind you that we have sent everybody the eight choices in the Mental Freedom Control Panel. You all have that now in your invitations. That was requested. I think Abby requested that we at least give the list of the 8. So you all have that. But we're just on the 3rd right now, and we've not gotten to the 2 productive ones because we wanted to. This one seems to be pretty lively. But think about how difficult it is when you really believe what you say. I mean, think about our leaders. who tell what they think is really true, but everybody says it looks like an obvious lie to me. How could anyone think it's rational that you do these kind of things? But when you realize the person really believes what he's telling you, that this is the reason why I'm right, and there's no alternative. It's that black and white either or thinking, I'm right and you're wrong. But usually each party has something positive about it. The bottom result is wisdom. And I just offer one other tip here. Wisdom is another word for love. This is a little hard to think through, but what makes us different from animals is that we have the ability to engage in unconditional love. And unconditional love is directing your energy for the benefit of someone or someone else without expecting anything in return. That's unconditional love. And wisdom, when you think about it, wisdom is action that gets the desired outcome of what we want. So wisdom is the activity that leads to a positive outcome. And unconditional love is actually pretty much in the same ballpark. It's doing something for someone that shows our desire to be helpful and beneficial, as opposed to hate.
I'm thinking about an aspect of avoidance that I'm thinking of it maybe is confused with sheer greed. This is a mental pattern that I go to. I think about Denise down there getting blown out by the hurricane, and people in poor countries that don't have enough clean water, and horrible diseases that are looking for people to spend money in research. And at some point, you think, wow, all these things, these people have such harder times than I have. And, shouldn't I be giving away all of my resources to help all of these different problems? And, what prevents me from doing that, is, in a sense, there's some level of avoidance that, I know there's a ton of things out there that need to be done. And, should I do any of them or all of them? And then at some point it's like, well, it's easier just to avoid thinking about them all rather than actually do anything about it. So sorry about that, Denise. But I think that, I wonder, that comes to my mind as some, maybe something inspiring of guilt or a way of avoiding guilt, is some, avoiding thinking about that incongruity of, I have more, I should share, or at some point just admitting that is my own human nature at some point, saying, yeah, is that wisdom to sort of say that, I can do what I can do, but, at some point I just need to enjoy my own life and stop worrying about all the things that, other people who are in worse shape than I am and how I need to go help them.
Slippery slope, once again, you can feel it incumbent upon yourself to help when and how you're able. But don't they say that the ultimate assistance you give is never being a burden to anyone else, and you do have to find a base level of taking care of yourself first, so that you're not in need, and then you can do what you can to help others. You have to be very careful about that. Stripping yourself of your essentials is a dangerous thing to do, because then you're going to be needing help from someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that line there where, if I have plenty and other people have so little, I have a limited amount, but I do have a certain amount of guilt about, that situation.
Oh, I can help you, because you can surely be doing much more for me.
Now, how would I do that, Brad? Do I have to drive up there with a pile of gold?
No, a check is fine.
Anyways, that element of avoidance, getting back to the topic, is that's something that a form of avoidance that I guess I practice, and I'm not sure if a certain amount of that to me comes out as wisdom. There's certain things that I've decided I just don't want to really spend a lot of time and heartache about, because they would eat up a lot of my life's energy and resources. That I can rationalize certain things about why I shouldn't be giving everything away. But there is some line where I'm not sure if it's avoidance or it's just a cold decision that I've made. But anyways, I struggle with that, and talking about this, it brings up that rather unpleasant delineation.
Would this be a form of avoidance when people say, "Oh, I'm sending you love, sister. We're sending you love," and we're here in a food line going, "Hey, send us a pork chop," we're like. And actually, I did have a great friend. She said, "I'm sending you a survival kit," and it was just little trinkets and things just to brighten the day. Just a little gift box just to say, "Hey, we're thinking about you." Of like toothpicks and just weird little gifts, and it just and nutrition like vitamins, and it was really inspiring. Then getting the "I'm sending you love, sister. We're praying for you." Well, thank you. Right now, thank you for that.
I think
Send
the
the
people
Red
who are
Cross with some groceries. No, we're good
folks
now.
folks who are doing that are doing more for themselves
Yeah.
than for you. They're making a token gesture to alleviate guilt. I think that's very black and white. I don't think there's, when you need potable water and someone is sending you love, that's
exactly.
we appreciate we appreciate the thoughts, but something tangible is in order here.
Exactly.
Isn't it part of it too? You don't know. If someone knew you, Denise, and they can send a check or they can send a gift box because they know you personally. That's
Yeah.
But sometimes people they avoid, I guess, because they don't know what to do. So they throw up their hands in frustration or confusion. So that's when you avoid. It's like, I don't know how to, make everybody love one another. I don't know how to feed the world. I don't know how to stop nuclear obliteration. So that's when we throw up our hands and we avoid.
Well, we're learning here how to stop nuclear obliteration. That's something we're doing here, and that's really the raison d'etre for us to be here.
Right, we're talking about avoidance, right? Not many people are on these kinds of calls.
Absolutely true.
So how do we then either spread the word or think about what in our world? So when Abby was talking, I was like, well, I don't know, Abby, maybe think about something in your life where someone can benefit from your, whatever blessings you've received in your life. It could be very personal.
Yeah, I think there's always a line between where you give and where you don't. Otherwise, you just give everything away. And maybe some people would argue that should be the line, but at some point there is a line formed, and it's not an easy line to form. And it's probably dictated by wanting to do good as well as with greed.
Yeah, but
I think we can all agree that Abby could do more to make the world a better place.
We all, Pacey.
Oh, no, I agree with Pacey, only Abby.
Well, it's unanimous, Abby, and I think you owe a lot to all of us.
Well, it's kind of learning the reciprocity, giving it, the whole giving and receiving. And, by us coming here, we're doing our small individual, sending our small individual ripple into the big pot, hopefully, that, is a culmination of the positive energies. And I found that I have to be in surrender mode when I've tried to organize or plan or say this is going to happen, or Dawn, I'm going to have this peace guide call you at such and such. It never works out. But when I go into surrender mode and just allow the natural timing of things to bring things together, it's always way more beautiful than I could have planned it. It's what I've experienced.
Well, part of the goal of this meeting is as an example, remember, if we can the basic thing we've been saying is if we love ourselves enough with the abundance that overflows to enrich the world, if you really don't love yourself enough, you don't have anything to give away. You know, we keep thinking it's money or something physical, but you know, if we learn to love ourselves with the abundance that overflows, first you do have, you know, that you say, you know, on the airplane, you put on your own mask first and then put on your child's mask. So this is a meeting to share our genius, to try to find solutions to puzzles that no one has found the answer to yet. That is the purpose of our creative genius here, that we begin to first recognize our own area of difficulty. And I think what Einstein was telling us is that we're addicted to a way of thinking that is competitive with one another. It can be summed up in that one sentence: what's good for me and my family and my tribe for here and now. And if we can get to the next level, and by the way, that sentence was perfectly appropriate when we had no other ways of communicating, when we had limited resources and we had too many people we had to fight as a way of, so we had to join in tribes and then overpower the other tribe to get the limited resources. But what Einstein's, I think his brilliance was when he realized the power of E equals MC squared. He said, we can't continue to go on in a world where we compete and we kill a few people on each side and we each go on, carry on. We have weapons now that when people have them in quantity, and release them, and we have now a new situation we've never had before. You know, wars used to be the cause of peace. You know, that whenever the stronger tribe won, we had peace for a long period of time until another tribe got strong enough, and then their new values or their new weapons or their new technology, whether they had steel instead of copper or whatever, that their new weapons were the driver of evolution to higher levels of function. So we had that experience in the past, and it was perfectly normal. But when Einstein's brilliance was to say, when we have weapons that everybody's a loser, we have to change our way of thinking. And the fact is that for 3.5 billion years, we've been addicted to a way of thinking. We don't recognize these what Freud called these defense mechanisms, the ways we deceive ourselves in order to avoid unpleasant emotions. And our meeting, so you asked, what are we doing? I think if we can create a way of sharing our experience, I think this, if other people would begin to do this, if this can be a model of sharing our genius and finding, first recognizing ourselves, our own shortcomings, but you notice how we always start with what somebody else could do to change it, what the other person has the ability to do. And that's the close to blaming out response. And then the guilt response, you know, maybe you can say guilt does help us if it gets us to do something. But basically, I think we need to teach ourselves wisdom, which is another word for love. Love is learning to direct our energy for the benefit of those we care for our loved ones. And wisdom is sort of the same thing. It's directing it to have a positive outcome. So our words are very limited, and our words are stacked in one direction. Our words are mostly words that teach us to be tribal. We need to invent some new words. Of course, we've done some of this. We haven't even talked about some of the new words that make a difference. But our 7 word switches are the 7 most powerful words that change our way of thinking, to substitute for the other words. If we use these 7 words regularly, we change our meme, which our meme is the one sentence that determines our culture, our overall culture. And that meme, again, is what's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future. If we could have that one sentence, we would have peace in the world. But we still are addicted to this way of thinking, and that's what we don't want to face. Our way of thinking is what's good for me and my family and my tribe for here and now. That means whatever is not my tribe is inhuman. It's okay if we punish them, eat them, make them slaves or whatever, and we just ignore them. So that's sort of a summary statement. And we started a little late and we're getting a bit late now. So please comment on your last thoughts before we close our meeting.
Hmm.
So let me just close by saying my heart and goes out to the people in Pittsburgh, and hope we could find a way here and in the future to solve the hatred and turn it into love and forgiveness in the world.
Thanks, John.
Well, it becomes frightening, and I think everything that we're doing and saying here today, you have to realize that it's just not going to necessarily reach complete and utter mental illness or the kind of cognitive rat poison that goes on that creates a situation like Pittsburgh.
Pearl, you haven't commented. You have anything you'd like to say, or you want to pass? Okay, so okay, we haven't heard from you, Pearl. So, any last comments?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, well, all I'm saying is that I come to these meetings, I try to put aside what I think I know, and I try to incorporate what new ideas we may come up with in conversation and marinate with them so that whatever I'm trying to avoid, I can approach better with more knowledge than I, felt I had going into solving a problem. But a lot of this new knowledge, it takes time to incorporate into your thinking. And I think that that's one of the reasons you sort of try to take it in and then incorporate it and marinate with it, as I say, with it so that your ideas evolve or your feeling of approaching something evolves. And so the avoidance is a temporary thing in solving the problem. But there's so much to be learned and so many ways to approach things that these meetings are so helpful for and helpful for focusing. So for that, I thank everyone involved.
Yes, the realization is one thing. The real challenge is the implementation, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, that's it. The implementation.
Don, I'm going to avoid my last comment and hold it until next week because things are a little too raw right now in the country. And it's sad and it's painful. And it's destructive.
Well, that's it. Most of us are aware that things are not going very well, but in spite of it, the best we've come up with so far as the world situation, the 9 countries that have nuclear weapons, the way they've come up, their answer is you have to create more nuclear weapons. It's called mutual assured destruction. And that seems to be what most countries are advocating, have more weapons. And no one yet has come up with a sensible solution, as far as I can tell, that offers common sense, a short and long-term outcome. A lot of people have given up. They've developed this helpless, hopeless response, various ways of avoiding things. And next week we're going to be talking about the puzzle solving, one of the two responses on the mental freedom control panel that always seem to be positive and work. But it is helpful that we recognize our negative responses, the one that get us into trouble. They're the opposite of wisdom. So I suggest you look over the 8 choices and you'll have a little better idea when we come back in the future, the ones we haven't gotten to yet, even after we get to the puzzle solving ones. I just want to close with one other thought. When we have a negative response pattern, give a little thought to this, if you will. When we have a negative response pattern, there are two ways, at least two ways to deal with it. One is to find a better pattern. And if you use the better pattern, then the old one will atrophy from lack of use. So even if we have negative patterns, if we start using the positive patterns, the ones that no longer work will no longer and aren't being used eventually will disappear. They atrophy. That may be one way. The other way is to directly attack the negative ones. That is, we see what's wrong and we try to get rid of what's wrong. That's the alternative way. Now, both can be effective. It's a both-end situation. But probably if we go directly to the positive responses, what we've been doing wrong will eventually disappear from lack of use. But if we've been doing this for 3.5 billion years, we've been engaged in the fight or flight response, and it's part of our biology. It's part of our emotions that are more powerful than our intellect now. To strike out at others or blame ourselves or to avoid things, we can understand that it's not going to be changing all of a sudden. And it's one of the reasons why I suggest, at least in my point of view, that we need to establish genie seminars like this that are lifelong, that people go every week for their lifetime for continued education. Because once you have a serious addiction, the addiction of our thinking that we've inherited for many years is at least as powerful and probably more powerful than a heroin addiction or any substance abuse addiction. And we know how difficult those are to change. It takes a lot of work and continued support in order to do that. So I wish everybody lots of love, and look over your 8 choices, and we'll see you all next week. Have a very good week.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stop the recording.